It's the Rotoballer PGA show, and it is the third major of the year. It is the US Open, and we brought in the heavy hitter that was with us the last major, Mr. Keith Stewart. Sir, how are you? And thank you for coming back on the show after a disgusting ending last time.
You know what? I've chosen to not remember that, Byron. So I'm back with a vengeance. The rankings are done, and I couldn't be more excited to be with you and Spencer. That was my favorite show of the week at the PGA at Valhalla. Things kind of got sideways at the end of the week there, but I didn't get arrested. So I'm here in Pinehurst, and let's do it.
Let's do it. It's going to be Father's Day on Sunday. It's going to be a fun time around. We got the Payne Stewart legacy that's kind of living through this kind of location, which had me in tears last night while I was watching that rerun of 1999 and all that kind of stuff, now that I'm in my older age. And Spencer, talk to me about what you're feeling for this week. It's a fun US Open, man.
Yeah, the US Open's my favorite major of all of them. I know everybody's going to say Augusta. It's where you get the same venue every single year there, but there's just something about a US Open with the way that these courses are always set up that I love. I'm excited to be back with you this week, Byron. I missed the show last week celebrating my girlfriend's birthday. So good to be back here doing this. It's going to be a very fun tournament, and I'm interested to see how all of our rankings compare together, because one of the differences is I don't know what everybody's rankings are in comparison to mine. I know, Byron, you have to put the show together with a lot of these things, but we're going to have some good discussions.
Yeah, we are going to have some great discussions, and it's the US Open. And typically what I try to do when it comes to majors is use, especially now that LIV has fragmented itself off and the lack of reliable stats coming from that tour and the lack of reliable enthusiasm coming from that tour, so to say. We've seen some really mediocre performances from some superstars once they've headed over there. And what I like to do is use major strokes gained as my benchmark and my baseline for my model. And that's what I've done again. So I've got the same data for everybody. I'm not worrying about guys doing random things. However you've played in a major, that's how you're going to show up in my model. Yes, I've done a few Maniac things because I shave my face not only for Mrs. Maniac, but for Mr. Smith. And when the shirts and the stash and the hair and the wigs and the caps all come out, it is time to party. And this is the week where it's kind of a different situation, folks, because Cam Smith hasn't really had a chance to really find himself on a golf course that he can thrive at. This venue is completely different. So, Keith, please tell us. I know you've already chatted about Pat Mayo and how amazing your appearance on there was. I feel like your knowledge of comp courses, Mr. Stewart, is very impressive.
So you guys enjoyed that. Yeah, that was a good little rapport that Pat and I put together the other night. I'm getting thumbs up.
Oh my God. Right, the thing is, I was almost going to call you old again, but the knowledge in your pip about all these different courses and the different designers that were hanging out with each other and how their nuances overflowed into Pinehurst is fascinating. So from a high level situation, Keith, give us your take on this week.
Well, down here right away, the first thing you're going to notice is that it is crispy as heck. I know everyone's talking about Wyndham Clark coming in and saying, right away that he thought the greens were borderline or whatever. I think at this point we've learned to take some of what Wyndham Clark says, with a grain of salt. I mean, he only kind of opens up his mouth to change feet. So at the same time, having walked around and looked and everything, the place is firm and fast. And I mean, these are the sand hills. Even if it has rained in the last couple of weeks, the water filters very quickly. So what we expect this to be is exactly what we're getting ourselves into early in the week. And I know we'll get into a lot of different points about the players and everything. So if I just stick to the golf course, one of the big things that everyone keeps talking about came out of the one podcast. I forget who said it, but they've done a lot more plantings around the landing areas of wiregrass, weed grass, all sorts of grass. I mean, I guess grass is legal down here in North Carolina. I don't know. They have it everywhere. But the point being is that you're going to have to be a total driver of the golf ball. And even though the fairways are 35 to 40 yards wide, they're doing that on purpose because they can't stop the ball from rolling if it's moving side to side as well as it's moving forward. So you're definitely going to want to incorporate something like that. certainly approach play with a long iron is really something. We talked a lot about many of these things going into Valhalla. There wasn't much they could do at Valhalla. Everyone was very critical of that. And I actually thought it was a great championship. It was super wet out there. I mean, the ground was so soft underfoot, and it was soft everywhere, whether it was in the long grass, the short grass, the greens and everything. So, I mean, they're not dealing with the same type of soil out there. So I think they had a good championship, but this one's definitely going to be defended by par. There's no doubt about that. And I think a lot of it is going to be on edge. And, as much as Spencer, with all due respect, who he knows I love him, right? A lot of times U.S. Opens aren't my favorite, when it comes down to a major championship test, because I don't always feel like the best golfer wins, the one that was playing the best that week. The three of us, if we walked away from Valhalla, I'm sure we would have all agreed that the three guys that were at the top of the leaderboard were the guys that were playing the best that week, right? Would we all agree to that, right?
Yes.
Bryson, Victor, and obviously Xander, that those guys were really, really good that week. I feel there's just going to be too much luck involved with what happens this week. I'll go back a couple weeks to Lancaster Country Club. Look what happened with the Women's U.S. Open, right? The USGA is notorious for putting things on edge because they try to determine the championship by score rather than by letting the field just do their thing. So hopefully Mike won, and that leadership isn't like Mike Davis was so many years ago when they fought for even par to be the winning score, or maybe on the plus side. I mean, in my estimation, like the cut at a professional event shouldn't be +8. I mean, this is why the guys hated this event for so many years. So hopefully they keep things under control this week. And there's no doubt that you're going to need a tremendous amount of around the green skill. I know Pat and I got into that the other night, and we got deep in the weeds on that. But to me, I think that's really, the magic pixie dust that you're going to have to go with this week. You're going to have to be able to score from in and around these green complexes, and you're going to be able to do it with all sorts of crazy good shots. You're going to be chipping all the time from below the surface. So the only way you can get the ball to stop is with spin, which means you have to be very confident where your low point is at the bottom. And you got to hit those like little skitters in there, those like 1, 2, those shots. And those are hard to do. And like on the other side, there's like a treacherous bunker or something. So I really look forward to that. So I love that about what the venue is going to do this week. Yeah. I just hope that we keep it all under control.
I think we'll be okay. I hope so. And if not, you know what? Carnage is fun, Keith. So Spencer, how have you managed your model to kind of adapt with the carnage and, deal with the golf course that's not necessarily a typical US Open venue?
I mean, I guess the one thing that I would agree with what Keith just said is that we have had over the course of time, and not every single year, but there have been unfair iterations of the US Open where greens have become severely baked out, where there's become an advantage for players that are going off at a certain time. And that's what I would like to avoid here. When you look at a Donald Ross venue that you're going to get for the US Open, Ross is always known for these diabolically unique around the green complexes. It's going to be very different than the standard expectation that you're going to get on the PGA Tour weekly. It's going to be no different. You have these turtle shell greens. They have the propensity to repel shots entirely off the surface. Keith was talking about this, like it can roll 30 yards away from the hole. It can roll into traps. It can roll into these tight lies. All of that adds this headache of the construction. And I think when you add that to where the approach shots are going to come from, because we do have an increased expectation that's going to just happen over and over again from 175 plus yards, you get a very challenging course here because balls are going to have a hard time holding the surface on the second shot. And it's going to force players into these really unique outlooks. We've already heard it mentioned by golfers throughout this week. There are players that are way off the surface that are trying to chip and putt with their 3-woods to get back onto the greens. Like there's a very unique skill set that comes into play for venues like this. So a lot of that pushed me into this direction. Yeah. And maybe this is where I got a little bit different than most people is I weighed strokes gained approach less than usual. That doesn't necessarily mean that there's this massive discrepancy that's going to come into play. Really, more so, it's a couple % less. And then it's going to add this massive increase in all of these critical areas where I'm looking at. So I want to see how somebody performs from 175 plus yards. I want to see how that merges with somebody's around the green game. I think it's important potentially for green complexes like this. Look at Apex. How high is a player flying it into these green complexes? All of those things had a lot more to do with my approach metrics than normal. It's not some rudimentary, simplified outlook here. It really took 3 or 4 things. It merged them all together over and over again, and it tried to figure out who were the best players that were going to perform from those areas. And then when you look at the total driving, because it's so fast and firm, there are so many different areas where you can get into problems. Like Keith talked about, you can go into the wire grass. There's these gorse bushes.
Yeah.
Combination of accuracy and distance are going to be very important here. And a US Open for me, and I think this is what makes me love a US Open. I always feel like the player, and whether this is fair or not fair in a lot of these answers, it's the player who hits it the longest and the straightest off the tee is usually the one for the week that finds the most advantage anytime I've run or re-looked at my model from a lot of these US Opens. So it's going to take a complete all-around test here. I don't think it's simplified into any one specific nature of your game, but all of those things accentuated together does make this, every single part of your game is going to have to work, or there's big numbers out there to be found, and there are golfers that are going to implode.
There are. And I'll let you jump in here shortly, Keith, because the hard part about this week and the model, like Ian is asking in the chat here, is this is a really, I know we try to keep it quick, but now this is so fascinating to me because Ian's asking about knocking it to 35 feet, Keith. We know that guys have hit wedges 6 feet by, and it just rolls, it trickles off. We've seen Martin Keimer, Michael Campbell, and Old Payne. They've putted their balls off the putting green and won this tournament. So winners have putted their ball off the green and still won. So you have to have mental fortitude, to shout out Paul Azinger, and then also make sure that you can really keep your short game under control. This is the most I've ever weighted short game. I'm at 45%. And then when it comes to approach play, I'm looking for good shot percentage. I'm looking for guys that can hit it to a very short circle, small circle, because we have certain areas on these turtle shell greens that you have to hit. If you miss them, you're screwed. But at the same time, there's certain greens that have very safe areas, kind of like that par 3 we saw last week where Scotty kind of laid up and got up and down. But Keith, what do you think from an approach standpoint? Are you looking for aggression? Are you looking for passiveness? Is it a mixture of both? Is that what makes this so fun this week?
Honestly, if I was creating, a model and we could put any stat that you wanted in there, real or imaginative, game, strokes gained game plan would be the number one. And this is why Scotty has such a huge advantage. It's just that, he wins at Augusta because he starts with a 5-shot lead. I mean, he's just so cerebral about way he goes around the golf course. And then he's actually able to pull off how smart his plan is, which is interesting. Yeah. I mean, the genius of Ross, people they'll watch it this week and they still won't get it. You have to play it a bunch to really understand it. I spent 23 years as a club professional at different clubs up and down the Eastern Seaboard. And almost half of those were spent at Donald Ross golf courses. So I spent 11 years at 2 different Donald Ross golf courses. So the genius of him is that he is able to preserve par. And what I mean by that is that it makes it really hard to make birdie, but he makes it really easy to make bogey. And you're going to see a ton of that this week. And some of those will be so much on edge that those bogeys might turn into double bogeys because those guys will force the issue. But to really answer your question, Byron, you cannot be aggressive when you're going after some of these locations because the people on the grounds there will know exactly where to put the pins. One of the characteristic things, you're going to hear all these crazy buzzwords, we're all playing US Open bingo and everything. Like last year it was Barranca, and then we've already said Wiregrass a bunch of times. But another one is switchbacks. We've got 10 fader shots off the tee for a right-handed player, and then we've got 4, right to left shots or draw favored type tee shots, right? Well, almost all the time when you hit a fade tee shot, Ross is going to ask you to bring the ball back the other way on approach. That's the way he's going to sit the green on the angle. And then he's also going to only leave you hole locations that are going to feature that again. So at the end of the day, you have to be so good with the control of how you're going to attack everything. I mean, because Bryson chips with a 6-iron, I think that's a problem here, like it is at Augusta National for him. But I also think it's a problem that he tends to not stick to game plans. You know, like any guy that's like that, like a Victor, somebody that's like super aggressive, that just fires at pins all the time, they're going to need to know where the e-brake is. And I don't feel like those guys do. And you know, I think that having that guy, and I'm not going to call them a plotter or anything, but like Martin Keimer is the archetype for this. You know, like he was like totally this like detail oriented, like OCD. I'm going to put it there. I'm going to put it there, like chess like player, just like Scotty. Scotty just does it more of in a modern sense with more power. So you really have to be practical about how you approach all this thing. The old adage holds true, right, Spencer? You can't win it on Thursday, but you could lose this thing on Thursday.
I want to add one thing very quickly before we move on, and I'll pose a question to both of you because it's an interesting conversation that we're having here, and it's something that I ran in my model. So when I took baseline projections of every single player and I took their baseline approach metrics when you would throw them on any course, and then when you specifically just looked for venues where you needed to be a little bit more conservative. So this is what Keith is talking about, is not attacking every single green and every single pin here, and knowing where you can miss above anything else when you do end up hitting a bad shot. I don't want to go through all these names. We'll be here all day having this conversation, but I have the top 5 here of my model when I ran that. Would either of you two like to guess the names, the top couple that landed in this section? So this would be players that increase their baseline projection when given a course where they need to be more conservative.
Scotty
So
Scheffler.
these are,
yeah, Scotty. Zalatoris, I'll say.
Zalatoris is 5th.
Yeah.
Victor?
Victor is up there also. The top couple, I'll give you them. Number 1 is Cameron Smith. And these are not necessarily players that I am betting or love this week. I just think this is an interesting return above anything else. Number 2 was Xander Schauffele. The problem with Scotty that comes into play is Scotty is so good every which way with it that he doesn't necessarily increase his baseline, that he's just kind of flat across the board, but very good production. Number 1 in my model when looking in that area, just not necessarily going to get that massive increase there. Thagala, Zalatoris, Homa. That would be what rounds out the top 5 of my model there.
I like that. It makes a lot of sense. You know, and I think a lot of those guys as well, outside of Zal, are very good scramblers. Do you think maybe, you know, being able to having confidence in your ability to kind of potentially feel like you can try and hit the shot that the course is demanding from you, knowing that if you don't put it off, you can still get up and down regardless, which I think is going to play a big role this week. So,
wait a second. They're not all good scramblers. They're all good putters. Homa, Thagala, Smith. They're all really good putters. So they know they could hit conservative shots into greens and give themselves 30 footers. And that at worst, they're always going to 2-putt, right? They don't force the issue because they're worried about what they're going to do with the putter, right? Thagala's been notorious this year as a bad scrambler, right? I mean, obviously Cam Smith's world-class at everything, but I think it's more along the lines of they can allow themselves to be conservative hitting into greens because they make so many putts like in the 20 to 30 foot range.
Yeah, it's the conversation, Byron, that you and I have had on this show with Xander Schauffele specifically. When you give him these green complexes where he cannot attack and he can use some of that overall safety that comes into his mix there, these are the courses where he seems to find his best success. So I know there's a lot of people in the space that have differing opinions on Xander this week. I really like Xander for this tournament. Like, I don't see this hangover that's going to come into play that I know that's been out there in the space quite frequently.
We'll chat about that here shortly because I have a top 10 and a top 20 in all 4 majors for Xander that I'm really curious to chat about to you guys. So we'll get there shortly. But Keith, as we dive into our rankings over here for the US Open, just tell the people that we've got the Golf Digest rankings out there for every single golfer in the field. Some might be grouped together. Some, as we get closer to the top of the board, kind of finding their own write-up, but just touch the people about what's going on in the Golf Digest article there for us.
So for each major, I'm tasked with the opportunity to rank everyone from 1 to 156. So full disclosure, at the time that I create the rankings, the USGA, in full USGA splendor, only had 151 people included. Well, I assumed Robert McIntyre gets one of those 6 spots. But then as the weekend broke down, like Adam Scott and everything, but really it was the top 150 that were in at that time that I put into my rankings. But none of those guys were going to break the top 10 that were getting in as the last 6. They were published this morning at 7 a.m. You just type in U.S. Open Power Rankings, and that's the first thing that's going to pop up on Google. That's the beauty of Golf Digest. So you have a PGA professional that is ranking the players based upon basically the architecture, the Donald Rossness of this place, the agronomy, the changes to that, and everything else that you could consider, even down to the fact that, I know I'm going to have a conversation with you guys, and I actually took that into consideration. And what we might develop as part of, this whole show this evening, because I knew we were going to go over it again. I didn't know that last time, but this time I came prepared.
Well, Keith, let us know. Why is one of the most impressive major athletes of our era ranked number 10 for you?
I think that Brooks Koepka could have been a lot higher, except for his performances this year. So that gave me pause. And that, as we'll go through this, I don't even have a guy like John Rahm in the top 10 anymore. But, Brooks, he was 45th there at Augusta. Then he came back and he apologized to his team and he said he was going to come back stronger and better. And maybe a lot of people argue that Valhalla wasn't a good fit for Brooks, but at the end of the day, I mean, the PGA Championship should be Brooks's wheelhouse every year, no matter where they put the golf course. A very underrated short game player. Obviously, he's shown that he can play Pinehurst very well. He's won a U.S. Open at a place like Shinnecock. He is good at other comp courses, whether that be concession, if you want to use that as a comp, just because you're thinking about agronomy. If you want to think about the agronomy where they have the Hey Jude, St. Jude, strike that.
Hey Jude.
I love the Hey Jude. So I gave him the 10th spot because basically this should be in his wheelhouse. And he hasn't really proved that he should be there. So
yeah,
it's a bit belief. And, as it comes with Liv, hey, it's great that he shot 7 under on Sunday in Houston, but we do need a little bit more. And 10th is the best I could do for him.
I can see that, Keith. It's going to be difficult to rank Brooks this week because of he's got such a wide range of outcomes, right? So, Spencer, you've got Tommy Fleetwood matched up with the odds board at number 10.
I think this is one of those discussions that we have almost every week when it comes to Tommy Fleetwood. And I guess it plays a little bit differently from a DFS perspective than anything. This belief of his lack of win equity hurts him so much in a lot of these positions. And it's interesting because look at the odds board here. Like, he's the 10th player. He's 10th in my model. He actually climbs to 8th overall for upside. I didn't end up punching the outright ticket on Tommy Fleetwood because I feel like I've been down this path one too many times with him. And I decided to take a very aggressive approach at the top. Like, it's about as aggressive as I've ever gotten on a card where I don't have Scotty Scheffler, which is the interesting answer to that. But I do have 2 players that are going to be sub 20-1 that I'm building the majority of my card around. But if I wasn't so heavy with that route that I took, I really like Tommy Fleetwood here. From a statistical perspective, if we want to talk about players that increase their baseline with their approach when you need to be safer, Tommy is that next name that would have fit that bill. He was 6th overall for me. So inside of the top 30 and pretty much any value that I was trying to put a critical weight to this week, I am curious to see where the ownership lands because we've gotten into a spot with him, it feels like, in back-to-back tournaments where the first week he was very highly owned, and I think the general public thought he disappointed there. Still a fine finish. And then last week we got into a position where everybody thought he was overpriced. He was one of my favorite plays. I don't know if he necessarily warranted the price tag that we got with the finish that he ended up providing with the 20th. It was a very neutral finish for him, but this lack of perceived win equity or upside from the general public is putting us in an interesting position. I'm curious to see where the ownership lands. I think at 8,500, we don't necessarily need all that ownership this time, which is one of the reasons why I think Fleetwood is probably one of these best values you can find on the board. And at 8,500 here, if we're talking specifically for DraftKings, I'm going to have a lot of exposure for him in DFS.
He's been crushing it, Spencer. He's in this field. He's the third best guy in top 10 return for your bets there. So I think that's why you're seeing this outright number so short or 35-1 for Tommy seems relatively short in a field that has Scotty Scheffler and Brooks. So the fact that he's such a consistently regular finisher in the top of the board, but not like really contending, it's a situation that's really just difficult to bet the guy because the outright number sucks, but they've respected his placement market because of his consistency. So, yeah, we are. Tommy Fleetwood, top 10 guy, flirting with top 10 pretty much perennially, in his career. So I have, for myself, a certain somebody who I just completely shut down. Yeah, go ahead.
Real quick, Byron. Spencer, I have one question for you. If I told you that 15 of the last 19 U.S. Open winners was a first-time major winner, you'd feel pretty comfortable going with Tommy Fleetwood, wouldn't you?
You would probably be one of the top guys on the list. And I do think that, like, you look at U.S. Opens and you're talking about that with the first-time winners that have seemed to crack through and, look at one of his compatriots in Matthew Fitzpatrick. Like,
yeah,
there's been so many golfers over the course of time that are thought of as players who cannot win. Look at Xander at the PGA Championship. I know Xander had more success on the PGA Tour, but he didn't have that high-end success of actually winning some of these major championships. I said this after Xander won. You're viewed as a golfer who cannot win until you change the narrative. And once you get that one victory, the floodgates can open. So
sure.
This is a really nice spot for Fleetwood. Like, this is about as good of an opportunity in quite a long time, according to my model, that he actually has to win one of these tournaments.
Agreed.
I could not agree with you more, Spencer. This is a very unique opportunity for a lot of guys that are looking to get a US Open on their resume to get it. Because when you go to Whistling Straits, when you go to all of these courses, Oak Hill, like when you just have to pound drive a 310 in the air and gouge a 7-iron out, that eliminates a large chunk of the field. This week, I'm so excited because anyone can show up. It's going to be hard for anyone to show up, but the possibility is there. This golf course brings the field together, which is kind of why I'm not super scared about Scotty this week, although this golf course is super, super tailored to his skill set. And I know that's a thing you never want to say on the internet, and life is life, but I had to pop in Cam Smith for my number 10. I haven't bet him hardly this year. I think I bet him at like 70-1 at the PGA just because of the number, but I'm a Cam Smith homer, and he's been my guy that I've hit every single Cam Smith win on the PGA Tour since bet. Like, when he's won, I've had him, and maybe it's because I bet him a lot, but also the best part about Cam Smith is you can get him at 40-1. So he's not even your lead guy on your card. And this guy is an Open Championship winner, and he can make putts and chip. When I was watching like Kevin Na and Michael Campbell, Michael Campbell's from New Zealand, but that's also pretty much the same continent called Australasia, and that's where Cam Smith is from, mate. So we're going to see a sand belt correlation here, Keith, right? We got a bit of sand belty stuff.
Big time.
And if you are looking for somebody, Cam's driver, obviously going to be a massive issue. But if you're looking for someone that can miraculously chip and putt their way to another major, he's a major winner, and this guy can do it. So I'm so excited to see how he handles this golf course this week. So, yeah. Let's dive into number 9 for the odds board is John Rahm, which is interesting. I'm not entirely sure how I feel about that, but Keith, you've got Ludwig for your number 9 guy.
Can I ask one question before we move on? Keith, where did you have John Rahm in your model?
I have him at 11th. Now, full disclosure, I had to do the rankings before he pulled out of Live. So he would still be in my top 20, to be honest, to be completely transparent. But I have him at 11th because basically he just hasn't shown up this year, but he's still John Rahm. And you have to be worried about that. It's the same reason he's 2,800, is that the liability that if you threw John Rahm at a number like 40, the amount of people that would just smash that with just with obnoxious amounts of money, just because it's John Rahm. I mean, I'm sure people hammered it at Valhalla when he got to 20, right? I mean, a year before that, he was the betting favorite at the PGA. So they have to play that liability game that we don't have to play. So that's why that number is always a little bit lower, but I had him at 11.
Yeah. And Spence, to kind of answer your question there, I had to jack him maniac override big time. his major track record and pedigree is incredible. Like if I just left the model the way it is, he's sitting inside the top 5 because this guy's been a major menace. Like he's got 2 on his card already, and this guy's got the power and the long iron ability and the short game touch to take care of any golf course. So he's injured, he's hurt, he's not playing great golf. There's a lot going on. His wife's pregnant with a 3rd kid. It's just his life is chaos. His Saturn is missing its ring and it's just spinning. I kicked a tent today in my garage, and a whole bunch of like moths and those like crawly things came flying out of the tent in my garage. That's like what John Rahm is to me at this point. Like it's this awesome tent that can provide you the shelter of betting top 10s and amazing consistency in majors, but now when it's folded up on live, we've got insects and all sorts of crap hiding in the midst there, and this is why he's 28-1 at a US Open. So tough scenes for old Rahm this week. So Keith, talk to us about Ludwig at number 9.
He looked really good at Memorial. You can say what you want about a partially torn meniscus, but he looked really good at Memorial. And you can't say that the whole rookie thing. I mean, look what he did at Augusta. Obviously, he can game plan the heck out of somewhere. He's 9 and not lower because the short game's not better. That's basically what it comes down to. But ultimate driving, long iron play. There were so many great little chip shots and scoring shots that he hit on drivable par 4s or the par 5s there at Sea Island that were, they were nice tight lies, and he just hit them so well. Very creative player for somebody that kind of hits it like a robot. So I thought he looked great this weekend. He was 9th just because there's this health issue, but otherwise, it's full steam ahead with him.
Yeah, we've got 2 guys with health issues right at the top of the board. Yes, Spencer. Going into your number 9 ranking, hit me with Victor Hovland.
It's an interesting case with Victor Hovland here. If we look at Valhalla, this was a 50-1 golfer who I had an outright ticket on, who overachieved from what he had been producing leading up to that tournament. And now all of a sudden, you get a $9,800 price tag. You get a golfer that is sub 16-1 pretty much everywhere that you're looking at this week. I guess my concerns would be, and this is for me having a golfer in the top 10. So it's not to say that I don't like Victor Hovland. I guess my biggest concern would come down to the price tag for DraftKings and the price in the outright market are really not conducive anymore for the amount of popularity that he's going to probably still bring for DFS contests. He's 134th for me in strokes gained around the green. When you put him on these fast green complexes, we can maybe talk about his ability to putt from off the surface, and some of that 3-putt percentages actually will make him a little bit better in those spots. But to me, this is one of those golfers to where he's 9th. He has negative leverage for upside. And I tend to think that, unfortunately, in some of these situations, you get priced out of the market. It's kind of what Keith was talking about with Rahm, where if you make Rahm 40-1, everybody wants to go punch that ticket. And if you make Victor Hovland 40-1 here, he's going to be the most bet player on the board. Sportsbooks are masking against that potential or possibility coming into play. And a lot of times when a market overcorrects itself, which is where I kind of think we are right now, that player is taken out of the player pool from me from actually having realistic potential to back them in any market, unless you gave me a matchup against him, against somebody. But even if you look at his matchups early in the week, he's against Morikawa, he's against Oberg, he's against all these players that are going to also be in the top 10 on my model. And I lean towards the answer that he's probably my least preferred of the group, even though a lot of those names, and you're going to see them all pop up for me in the next little bit, they're all very close to one another.
Yeah, these guys are all very close. And this is the fun part about doing this ranking part of the show is you splitting hairs, and trying to find an edge here and there based off of a nuance, like really at the end of the day, it's all nuance based. And I was listening to Jeff Ogilvy about his breakdown about Pinehurst number 2. And he mentioned that on the PGA Tour, professionals can really just, they're almost not scared to short side themselves when the rough is thick in these kind of major territories, because it's easier to get up and down when you've short-sided yourself close to the flag out of thick rough versus having to chip super, super far, right? Because a lot of the time your ball will just be 1 or 2 feet over the green and you're just hacking it out the cabbage and just letting it trickle down to the green. This week, it's totally different. And although Victor Hovland, Spencer, has gained the 28th most strokes around the green in majors, it does make me feel like it's because of the thick grass that he's really thrived in those environments. And then you think about the Open Championship, where he almost, kind of carried Rory down with him in that final grouping there, at a venue that's, in my mind, I've been thinking about St. Andrews. And I know you mentioned this on the show with Pat, Keith, and it was quite funny because I purposely waited to watch it because I wanted to generate my own opinion about this venue. And I thought, man, St. Andrews is a very similar kind of a test by having to get up and down for birdie versus bogey or par, right? Because these guys were driving greens and hitting par fives in 2 and just really, really kind of having to rely on their short game to make birdies versus pars, so it's an interesting concept.
Just think of it like I put you anywhere on the golf course, get it in the least amount of strokes, right? So, par is irrelevant. And, him finishing 4th there, the Victor thing is interesting because it's almost for me, and he's my next go around. So I'll just add to that real quickly. And then when we get to him, but like it's with Victor, it's like a tale of two cities. I was talking about it last week when I was talking about Jordan and on the range, but a little Charles Dickens, it's the best of times. It was the worst of times. Well, the Masters, he missed the cut, shoot 81. And the next thing you know, he's contending at Valhalla. And that's typical Victor. He's got wonderful comps and a 3rd at the Players, and he's got a 4th at St. Andrews. But then, we're all a little worried about what can happen this week when he's, just given this short grass all week and he's going to be super aggressive firing at these turtleback greens.
Yep. But the thing is, I'm almost willing to, so in DFS, I'll be going to him because I think I think people will be like we've had this, we had Max in the chat just say, the overblown popularity of him, like sucking it up last week, tough scenes, and then the short grass, like Sweet Spot says, I think the ownership on Victor could potentially see a dip. We're also seeing it reflected in his price. I was interested in him this week, but at 16, at 18, I'd rather go to some other guys that we can chat about here shortly. So yeah, that was tough sell for me on Vic at that price, but I'm still kind of bullish on his ability. Bryson kind of jumps in at 9 for me. I'm not overly thrilled about this. I just feel like he is a major contender. I don't think this is the ideal venue for him. When I think about Bryson winning golf tournaments, I think about thick rough. And I think his edge is lost when there's less grass. So that's basically my quick summary on Bryson. So quick take there. Let's dive into the number 8 here for Ludwig. You already mentioned Victor Hovland as your number 8 guy there. Keith Spence has got Ludwig. Did I get your opinion on Spence? On Ludwig?
No, and I'll keep it very short because I think Keith, what he said is kind of where I would double down with it. If he was healthy and maybe we had a little bit more on the around the green game, this was an enticing price. The problem that we run into though is there's an injury that's coming into play. I'm speaking specifically outright betting here, but there's an injury that's coming into play and you're not getting a baked up number that's allowing that injury to like take a chance with it. So he's priced out in the outright market, but this is a nice spot for him. He looked very good last week.
Oh,
I can see. Sorry, go ahead, Keith.
I mean, I was there and I know what looks good and it looked good. It looked good.
And the most frustrating thing about Ludwig is he's a really good putter. Like he can make long putts and his short game sucks, but he's going to be making those par saves like crazy this week. And I think we're going to see it. And if these greens are rolling as true as they do, like at Sawgrass, at Waste Management, I think we're going to really see tons and tons of putts get hold this week. And it's going to add variability to the whole situation because the more putts that get made, the less predictable golf can be, right? So situations like that make it betting difficult.
Just to touch on that real quick, Byron, that was like one of two points that I thought caught Pat's attention the most when he just kept rapid firing, like really thoughtful questions for me about the golf course. And it's like everyone looks at those turtleback greens and they're 6,500 square feet on average. And like a third of those things, they're basically unusable because they just fall off on the sides. It's like a Dali clock painting, they're just like melting, right? And then, but you can't make the center of those things that crazy, because then there would be no place for the cup, right? They would be uncuppable, right? So the greens themselves, you can actually putt those things. Go look at those leaderboards. They're littered with great putters. You can make putts if you get it on the green. And that's the key here. And that's why some of the guys in my list I've featured, because like I want some good putters on this, on my squad to try to win this thing, because I think you can make putts.
You can. And we know that you need to make putts, right? Ask Martin Keimer about it all. So, Spencer, we've got some fun stuff going on here. I'm going to rattle off one more guy here real quick. Willie Z, in my opinion, I just have to play this guy in a major. And he was second or third in my model before I had to jump him backwards. He's carrying a lot of the prior distance before the surgery along with him there. So I've kind of understood this. But I was bullish on him going into the PGA Championship. And as Spencer mentioned to me, it's not a great situation. Like the way the scoring unfolded there didn't work out. If you got Willie Z trying to win a tournament at maybe -5 this week, that's when I want him. And I'm not betting him to win this thing, but I'll be playing him in DFS. Potentially, if some numbers go rogue on a top 5, I'll pounce on that. This guy is a major guy. I feel like a venue like this maybe suits his new game a little bit better than the old one we had. And I know neither of you had Willie Z in your top 10 and don't really have too much more to say about him. Here's Brooksy sitting number 7 at 22-1. We'll go to Keith's number 7 guy, and it's Cameron Smith. So touch us up on Cam Smith and then get us to Spencer there, Keith.
I am very high on Cam Smith this week, so much so that I've been growing my hair out in the back. I mean, this guy is the perfect fit for this place, right? Players champ, of course, St. Andrews. When it comes to getting the ball up and down and showing short game savvy, just like getting the ball on the least number of shots, that is Cam Smith. And that's what you're going to have to do this week. And everyone's going to talk about, Keith off the tee, there's going to be problems. Everyone's going to have problems, right? But the one guy that you have the most faith in on any list anywhere is this guy to solve problems when they come up, especially in a major championship. I mean, this guy's a big game hunter. We could talk about all these different parallels, but he grew up on the sand belt. I mean, this is the same sort of texture. The guy can obviously play on this type of Bermuda grass. So it's just, for me, I think that this is one of those guys. I wrote about him this morning when the odds dropped. He was at plus 4,500. I thought that there was great value there. He's a guy that I'm definitely going to bet outright, and I'm going to enjoy every minute of those 72 holes that he plays, because at the end of the day, someone's going to need to stare down the man, and this guy can stare people down. He is not afraid, and we need to know that, right?
God damn, Keith. You got me ramped up, man. I love it. He does not hesitate. Like that back 9 at the Open was scintillating. This year in 2024, the top 25 strokes gained. There's 3 guys that find themselves on that list twice. Hideki, Minwoo and strokes gained around the green, which is very important this week. The top 25 guys this year, Hideki, Minwoo and Cam Smith. Cam Smith has only got 8 rounds of golf, and he finds himself gaining 3 strokes twice in those 8 rounds in the 2 majors. So, that's ludicrous in my opinion. So tons and tons of fans with Cam Smith there. And bear in mind, he lost 5 strokes off the tee at the Players and still won that tournament. So fun stuff there. He's a unicorn. Spencer, Colin Morikawa.
Think about when he won that Players. That was the crazy one with all the weather and all the delays and all the wild stuff that was going on. And he still got it done, right? Think about, you want to talk about patience or being able to see a golf course and understand how to score. How about on the 71st hole when he won the Open Championship, how he went around the bunker and then made the 10-footer, right? You know what kind of patience it takes to do that? What kind of resolve? What kind of self-belief you have to have in your putter in order to make that play with the tournament on the line? I mean, this guy he's got serious, serious stones, and you need that against Scotty, man. It's tough. I love him.
Because this show is going to go long. I'm not going to even try and speed it up that much more. When Cam was going toe-to-toe with Jon Rahm, when Cam was going toe-to-toe with Rory at the Open, this guy does not back down. He's so much fun to watch. So, that's what my favorite part about these majors.
You know what I have in both of those 2 tournaments that you're talking about, whether it's the Open Championship or the Players where Cam Smith won, is I had the entire leaderboard around Cam Smith, but did not have Cam Smith as a ticket. So I don't have these glowing reviews like you guys do with it. I have not had the success at the end of the day, but I certainly understand why both of you guys like him this week.
But Spencer, he's not a model darling.
No.
At the end of the day, you know?
No. But
if you
Spencer did bring him up earlier when he talked about conservative approach players.
Yeah.
Did I hear that correctly? Who was number one on that list?
Mm-hmm.
Yep, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And don't forget, for people that weren't listening the other night to Pat, right? Why is TPC Sawgrass such a huge comp course, or Heritage for that matter, or Harbortown? Why are they both huge comp courses for what we're going to see this week and how these guys are going to game plan their way around Pinehurst number 2? Pete Dye served at Fort Bragg in North Carolina in the 40s. And he used to take his supervising officer down there, and they used to go play golf. And he studied that place when it was in its heyday, right? Before anyone had touched it, when it was still like it is now, the way that they renewed it to, right? Back there in 2010. There's so many influences. Yes, Pete Dye does it with bulkheads and all sorts of weird different things, right? But it is the same thing that you're looking at this week, right? The way that he puts you on edge, and the way that you're constantly hitting off uneven lies and the switchbacks and all of these different factors that Ross was such a genius at doing. Dye copied all that. So did Corin Crenshaw. So did Gil Hans. I mean, that's why all these comps come from all these guys. Doak, like all these guys, they all were influenced by what Ross did. He did over 400 different courses, and none of them are the same. You mean to tell me that like Oak Hill is a comp for Pinehurst number 2? And you're going to hear that this week, but if they're not, but they're the same guy. He was so good at using the land and then making it work for what it is. And this was just so close to when he came over from Dornoch that the influences from over there in Scotland, you have to see them in the ground game. This is not aerial architecture. This is you get the ball on the ground. And who's better at doing that? Some of these guys that we're listing.
Yeah. And Spence, Colin Morikawa's short game and putting and chipping now, it used to be very good in majors, and now it's good in non-majors too. So hit me with your Colin Morikawa and why he's number 7. I think me and Keith will be coming up with our guy shortly.
I think you can make a real big argument that I am a little bit too low on Colin Morikawa with this ranking. And the reason why he got pushed lower in my sheet just stemmed from this price reduction that we've seen from him, of where, he is now the 4th or the 5th favorite at pretty much every single book that you're looking at. I tend to think that he's probably the safest golfer on the board in the 10. If you remove the players from $10,000 and up, I would say Morikawa is probably the safest name beneath that if I am looking for a made cut and a potential top 20 finish. Some of the upside numbers pushed me in a different direction just because I thought this price got overly reduced from what we did last week. But really, really nice course fit for him, where it's challenging to say anything bad about him outside of what his outright number is. And why he's so intriguing though on DraftKings is we got a price tag that does not correlate directly with that outright number. Like, this is more of the true number of where it opened up before Morikawa ended up almost winning the Memorial last week. So really like him for DFS. I think he's going to be very popular. He's going to be a staple of any single cash game lineup that I make. I have more concerns in the outright price just because I think that we have lost a lot of the value from where this number's moved.
All right. I'm going to knock my guy out here as well while we're talking about him. I've bet Colin Morikawa at 20-1 at Bet365 with ties each way 3 places, because I think Colin's going to finish second in this tournament again. So if he finishes second, I'll get my each way. But if he doesn't and somehow wins this thing, because there's hardly going to ever be another major where accuracy off the tee can really help him gain that distance that he lacks. And then at the same time, just leaning into that short game around the green. This is this is Augusta-esque when it comes to short game, capabilities. And I think, he's just showing it so much right now. So if Scotty stumbles, I think Colin can do something this week. I'm going to take a gamble on the guy. Hit me with your guy there, Spence. What's his situation? I just wanted to say very quickly with Colin that the 20-1 number that you talked about is a lot different than the 14s and the 16s that we have in the space right now. At 20, this is a different conversation to be had. It's much closer
to what I think is actually accurate for that price. And a lot of that movement that we've seen would make me believe that that is not just square money that's hitting. There's some sharp money that's hitting that too. Big favorite in every single matchup. I guess I'm more so speaking of this movement that's been pushed into the 14-1 range now, not necessarily the 20s that you're talking about.
Yeah, and like I said, that 20 is only available because they had me locked in for the top 3. So I'm only getting like 4-1 on the top 3 really, but Colin's been doing this stuff, man. So at that price, I was cool to go because why? Cam Smith gives me some space on the rest of the card, right? So it's a really exciting, that's my favorite part about Cam is the fact that he's hardly ever your number one ace, so it's really fascinating to see how your card can unfold with that. I'm curious to see if Colin can win a major in a non-COVID environment too, because those 2 majors, not a lot of people kind of weighing down on him, right, Keith?
I'm high on Colin.
I'm high too.
For all the reasons you guys said and a whole lot more. The one thing we could be critical of, or we used to be critical of Colin for over his last 5 starts, he's gained 2.5 on average around the green and 2.1 with the putter. Those are the 2 things he couldn't do. And he was winning majors. And, every year when we go to the Players, he is, at the top of the conversation board as someone that should win there. It's just his game suits this. So, you could pop him up on the board where I have him, but it's for me, he is the one guy. I'll just close with this: 3rd, 9th, 16th, 4th, 2nd. He is the only player that has finished in the top 5 in both majors this year. And that includes Scotty and that includes Xander. He has a 3rd and a 4th, Colin Morikawa.
He's incredibly in majors. He's a major savage, and I'm just waiting for that upside to pull through. So we'll have to see what he can do. It's going to be fascinating. But I popped up Colin for you there, Keith, and it's not even you. It's the odds board. But I'll find him here shortly. This is the fun part about making it all white because I don't even know where it is either. So let's talk about your 6th guy in the meantime and move along from there.
This is going to be everyone's model darling because he's such a good around the green player. Is Hideki's rate, is he enough under the radar to show up like he did at Riviera, or is he too chalky? Because if he's too chalky, you won't get any good Hideki. But if he's not, if he's able to walk in and just do his thing, then Hideki, he could be legit this week.
I'm along with you there. I've got Hideki on my outright card as well. If you're looking at approach play at venues, so Sam Burns, I was looking at his Valspar putting splits with 20 rounds minimum. I was looking, what strokes gain category in the other areas is anyone better than Sam Burns putting at Valspar? The only person to have better strokes gained than Sam Burns putting at Valspar is Hideki Matsuyama on approach at US Opens, gaining 1.8 strokes on approach per round with 20 rounds minimum. Sam Burns gaining 1.7 on the putting surfaces there at Valspar. So this is Hideki Matsuyama's gravy train. The around the green play is going to be so emphasized. He's incredible around the greens right now, Keith. Incredible.
If we want to say if he's too chalky or not, and this is not meant as a shot, Byron. I don't think you're on chalky people every single week, but I know you're not on Hideki Matsuyama ever. So if you are on Hideki Matsuyama this week, he's going to be chalky. And you see that with the early ownership right now. Like, I will run this again on Tuesday. We will get a better indication for DFS. He looks like outside of Scotty, maybe Colin, like those are going to be the top 3 owned guys most likely.
Yeah. Because he's a model darling this week.
Yeah, he looks great. He's 5th in my model, as Byron just brought up. So I'm even a spot ahead of you, Keith.
Yeah.
And if he gets super chalky, I'm okay kind of leaving him alone. The reason I like him is because he's got this boom or bust potential. This guy could easily lose more strokes putting than he gains on approach this week. That's easily Hideki Matsuyama's blueprint. So hopefully he can just chip in a million chips and kind of keep himself safe there. Spencer, let's chat. Minwoo Lee. This was the rogue agent. When I saw this, I was like, ooh, this is an interesting name that you're showing up in the top 10 at number 6 even.
That's one of the things that I talk about with my model is if you compare where my model ranks are compared to the odds board, you more or less have everybody within a spot or 2 of where they should be. Maybe a couple spots outside of that in one direction or the other. Minwoo was the one who broke my model this week. And you think about him on tight lies, He checks all the boxes there. He's 5th for me in long iron play plus around the green performance. Any of the weighted proximity numbers from 175 plus yards, he's 3rd. And oh yeah, if you want to look at the weighted total driving of what my model viewed him as, he's also the number 3 golfer there. So you're going to need a little bit more from him with his putter and his short game than we've gotten in some of these situations recently. But if you want to look at any of the fast around the green stuff, the hard scoring around the green stuff, that pushed him from outside of the top 50 for me from a 2-year baseline around the green to 23rd overall. And then if you want to look specifically at the Bermuda putting totals, he also saw an increase there going from 65th in my model inside of the top 50. So really the 2 areas of his game that had the biggest red flags for me inside of my sheet had reasons to be optimistic for his corollary trends on tracks that are similar. So I'm going to have Minwoo in so many different iterations of the market. I bet him outright. I have a head-to-head bet that I released over at Rotoballer with him. He's going to be a placement bet for me. I'm going to try to take this advantage and be way over consensus on him when it comes to any of those things, including here for DraftKings and DFS.
5th at LA.
I've got yeah,
5th at LA.
Exactly. And this
5th
is the
at
thing.
LA.
He's chipping. He shows up on that top end around the green number twice in the top 25 of the 3 guys that do it, Spencer. So I'm right there with you. I've got a bet against Kenny Kim, Minwoo Lee versus Sam Burns, and I feel very confident about that because now that you got your guy up here, now that Sam Burns is going to another major, Sam Burns just does not have any majors. Just by the way, he's not in the rankings right now, but he just doesn't have any majors. So I will be targeting him in a matchup again, along with Kenny's matchup. So we might be eating butterfish before the show or on the show. Who the heck knows? I don't know if you guys have heard that story. Go watch that episode somewhere else. But Spencer,
very quickly before we move on, I would be curious where both of you guys have Sam Burns in your model, just to add that point to it. So I have Sam Burns 50th.
I have Sam Burns missing the cut. No, yes. I'm just kidding. He's missed the cut at Masters. He's one of a few guys that's missed who's a name that missed the cut at the first 2 majors of the year.
Yeah.
Right?
That's not a surprise, though.
It's a tough look.
He's got 5 PGA Tour wins, not a single top 10 in a major.
Yeah, I got to scroll a while.
Yeah, that's the thing. Is like I can't even tell you, Spencer, where he's ranked because I don't want to use up all my bandwidth on the scrolling there. So,
I mean, it seems like we all have him outside the top 40 probably based off of this answer.
In all honesty, he's 60th there. But yeah, it's not good. And 60th is where the cut is this week. Surprise, surprise there, Mr. Stewart. So, yeah, very, very bullish on Minwoo there for you, Spencer.
Yeah, to answer
not
Maxwell's
surprised either. Yeah, I know.
To answer Maxwell's question, and I'll let you answer it for your end, Byron. I brought up Keith's article so I could help with this. So Minwoo is 59th for Keith, and then I'll let you tell everybody where Minwoo is for you, Byron.
Yeah, Minwoo for me is going to be ranked 29th. You know, like the iron play is just, it's always bad.
It's not good.
It's always bad, but that's what you're going to get with him. But you're always going to potentially have that 7 strokes gained short game somehow. You know, like that's just, he's a Cam Smith light, you know, basically. So
the thing is, though, where does he excel? He excels from 175 plus yards if he is going to find any success with the irons.
And he's incredible on these like positional venues. So he could be hitting like, think about TPC Sawgrass, you know, hit those stinger 2-3 irons and just roast a 2-iron 280, 290 yards around this venue. You know, I think I can see him potentially doing that.
My only question is, does he ever hit approach shots from over 175 yards with what a good driver he is? I don't think he ever does. The stats are off. Stats are off. I think it's a great grab. He was 5th at LACC, which is a good comp. Certainly for tight lies. You know, he
shows up at majors and US Open and PGA Championships. If you're betting this guy top 30, he cashed out for me, I think, last week or last major again. This guy just repeatedly finding himself inside the top 30s while Sam Burns is watching him do that from the couch over the weekend. Bryson DeChambeau. He's also right next to Victor at 20-1. He's the 5th ranked guy on the odds board. Keith, you've got your 5th ranked guy as Bryson DeChambeau. He's the first time he's showing up for us outside of mine.
If not for his sixth at the Augusta National Golf Club, I would probably have him much higher, or at least outside the top 10. But he showed me something there, and golly, he was really impressive at Valhalla. And I understand these are two totally different tests, but you're talking about a guy that's done something that only a couple people have done in the history of golf, and that's win a USAM, win a US Open, and win the individual NCAA title. Right. So like this guy's got some serious swagger when it comes to big events. So you can make arguments for him either way. I get really concerned in these types of situations where you have Bryson chipping with a 6-iron. But then again, we see videos of Tiger chipping with a 4-iron today. Right now, it's a 6-iron length with a sand wedge loft for Bryson, which is a lot different, but still, I'm comfortable with Bryson there. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, I don't know. Spencer, how do you feel about Bryson?
I think he's interesting contrarian-wise for DFS contests. I'm probably not going to get him anywhere else because I do worry about some of the short game stuff with him and his inability to chip, as Keith was talking about. But I can't imagine there's going to be any ownership. And at some point, like if I look from a safety portion of my model, he's inside the top 10. He falls in the wrong direction elsewhere with it, which is, I guess, where my concerns would be. But it's an interesting viewpoint because the odds board have him 5th. He has really no ownership from what I can see early on. And sometimes you get these positions where, because he is perceived to be overpriced in the eyes of people, maybe this changes over the next 24 hours. Like he could end up being very popular. And that's what happened a major ago with it, where all of a sudden all the late money and all the late ownership came in on him. And maybe that's what goes down again. But like the early numbers I see, which really means nothing on the very first day, I see him sub 10% right now.
Yeah, I'll take him at that because I think he's boom or bust. I think his spectrum is the widest of them all. And I think that's why we all so tentative with him. If we went upside, maybe Bryson's inside the top 4, top 3, but overall, he's going to get dinged there.
He's an incredible. He could go full Keimer and just putt all week because he's an incredible lag putter. Yes. He is. For as many weaknesses as he has around the green, if he could putt everywhere, you could see him just getting up and down all day because he is that good of a lag putter. Eighth at St. Andrews a couple years ago, and that's what he did. And people say, they'll get into the whole par argument. Well, he drove all those greens and everything, but still, he finished 8th.
But that's how he gets it done.
Yeah. He's so did Rory. You like Rory? He drove the greens.
Exactly. Love where we're going there. At -10, at 10% less ownership, I think, you can take a gamble there. I think that's totally fine. All right. Rory McIlroy's number 5 for me. I just think his life is in shambles right now. The other 4 guys that are ahead of him seem to have it a bit more together. And that's saying something about Scotty Scheffler, who's just had a new kid and been arrested in the last 6 weeks. So tough scenes. Yeah. So Rory at a venue that you have to be disciplined and all of this, we're going to see Rory throwing 3 woods at cameramen again this week. So that's pretty much my spiel. You got to respect him, but Keith, take on Rory.
It's not a CBS week, so Anyway, right. He's got the long left miss with the irons. Right now, he is uber talented, so he has to be in the top 5 because he is that generational style player. But I have huge concerns. If you start to go into these classically designed golf courses, you don't want to hit it short right, you don't want to hit it long left, because that was the way that the game was played back then. So Ross is going to have that tendency. You start going long left with your long irons here, like he's been doing lately, like he did at Memorial, right? Those other places where he won, those were very, very comfortable situations for Rory. As soon as things got uncomfortable, right? And US Open, TMZ could be there. So watch out.
Yeah, he's got a lot of stuff going on, like we said, and
trust me, he's got a lot of stuff going on.
Spencer, I know you. Keith, do you want to take another sip, or do you want to say what's on your mind?
No, I'm going here.
Go ahead, Spencer. I know you're going to have a bit more of a glowing review of Rory than we both will.
I do, but I would like to ask Keith this question, and I asked this when he came on the last time. What do you think the winning score is going to be for this tournament?
Ooh, I'm going to say like 4 to 6 range, something in there.
This is the problem with Rory. If I am trying to personally poke holes into the profile here, he has never won a golf tournament that's been a single-digit winning score. That has been something that I have named a million times on these podcasts, and it's kind of an unbelievable stat. And I think one of the reasons for that, if I want to give him the benefit of the doubt with that answer, there have been a lot of tournaments where he's won at like 12 under par, where the next closest person was 3 under par if we look 10 years ago. So
yeah,
he's one of those positions, kind of like the Scotty thing of what he's doing now, that he had the potential to just go nuclear at any point. I worry a little bit about the blow-up potential. I don't think he's good with course management. We can talk about the lack of ability of him and his caddy to actually, like, I honestly think I would be better on his bag to give him pointers of, if he would listen to me at least, to not do certain things, because Rory has the propensity to just do things that he shouldn't be doing in moments and hitting shots to places that you cannot do at this course. If you miss to the wrong place, you are going to be dead. And that's, I guess, my concern, that even if this looks good and I bet Rory to win this tournament, and maybe this is just where I have, Byron, I can admit when I have problems. Like, I might just have a problem with Rory that I can't stop doing this every single major championship. But if you make a mistake at any point, it's going to bite you. And that would be my one concern, is that even if this looks good for 3 days, Rory on Sunday makes a mistake that he shouldn't be making.
Yeah. Spencer, I have a question for you real quick, right? If we all agree that whoever this person is that we picked to win, we know in our heart that they have to be able to beat Scotty, right? That Scotty is going to be a part of this equation come Sunday afternoon, correct?
Yeah.
He's 0 for 9 this year against Scotty. I mean, even when Scotty hasn't won, he hasn't beat him. 0 for 9. So that gives me a lot of pause. Now, a winter market without, if Rory gets going like Rory could get going, like he went nuclear there at Quail Hollow, which was very comfortable for him, good CBS interview afterwards. It was all good.
Here would be my one hope to that, Keith. I guess that would be able to maybe differentiate the spot from him from what we've seen recently. So yes, 0 for 9 this season, hasn't beaten him in a tournament. There are some negative marks, and I don't expect Scotty to not be in contention. He is number 1 in my model. He should be number 1 in everybody's model. He is a legitimate person that if you want to say he's 3 to 1, 4 to 1, anywhere in that range, that price is not as far off as what you think it is. Like, that's a realistic price for him. He is over a stroke better than any person in this tournament in tee to green production in my 2-year running model per round. That's an outlandish number. My only thing that I could point towards that I would have hope for is that Rory's putting, and I think you can make that same answer for a couple of these guys near the top. Scotty has a downturn on similar Bermuda green complexes historically, that he moves in the wrong direction. And if we get one of those weeks from Scotty to where he doesn't have to be terrible, let's just say he loses 2 strokes putting and it takes him out from winning the tournament, Rory's going to need to gain 4, 5, 6 strokes with his putter. But I do think that's within the range of outcomes for him to potentially do here. So I'm going to a metric that I never want to overly grade, because I do think putting is such a boom or bust statistic at the end of the day. But like, outside of Xander, and if you want to say Brooks at his very best when we saw him in some of these majors, there were not very many players, at least on the high-end variety, that were better putters for me inside of my model for this course than Rory would be. So I guess the hope is that Rory beats Scotty with the putter by 5, 6, 7 strokes, and that's enough to overcome the deficit with the tee to green that Scotty's going to have on the entire field.
I think behind Bryson, Rory's next in spectrum. He can win this thing at any given moment, but at the same time, he's going to be watching with his boo bear on the couch maybe as well. You never freaking know with him. It's always a lottery. So yeah, it's going to be a fascinating week, Spencer. You've got Brooksy all the way down here in number 4. It's significantly better than what Keith had him, and slightly worse than what I have him. But hit me with your Brooks take quick.
You know what's funny, Byron, is I never played or liked Brooks when he was on the PGA Tour. And now all of a sudden, since he's left for Live, I find reasons to back him every week. And maybe that just comes down to this bias that's come into play where all of these Live golfers are not as highly owned as they used to be. And that was one of the reasons why I never bought this big game narrative that came into play, even after Brooks did it time and time again and would demolish some of these really good builds that I'd put together because I'd full fade him in these spots where he'd win the tournament. We're finally now starting to get reduced ownership with Brooks, and any of the major championship stuff, when we look at strokes gain total that you're running, Byron, will love him. I have 10% in my model for that. So it's not zero. That did boost him a little bit, but pretty much across the board, inside of the top 20 of almost every single main category that I looked at. And then some of those really high-end marks are what pushed him here to fourth. So he was fourth overall. He was fourth for upside. He was fourth for safety. I like Brooks for DFS. I'm probably not going to get there from an outright number. Probably more of that reason that Keith has talked about, just that we haven't seen it so far this year. And that worries me ever so slightly. But I think the ownership is low enough for DFS that I can take a chance on him there.
The ownership's low. The price is delightful. I have bet Brooks at 25-1. I think at that price, if Scotty wins, he wins. You know, I've bet Scotty top 10. So if he finishes inside the top 10, I'm getting half my outright stake back anyway. So it's basically like playing that market without Scotty in a weird way. But Brooksy, I don't mind putting him toe-to-toe. Like if there's Cam Smith, Brooks, you know, I think those are definitely two guys I would feel very comfortable with going down the stretch with Scotty. We've always, you know, anything could happen, but that's why I wanted that. And the fact that this guy is just, you know, when you have that brainstem light up at a venue that's difficult, I think that's what we're looking for here. Because the same thing as Will Zalatoris. The more easy a golf course is, yes, Brooks has won a major and a very easy golf course too, but he's best when he's really challenged. You know, I think that's Brooks' style. So
Keith talked about it also, just with the scar tissue, if you want to call it that, of every single player this season that can't seem to beat Scotty Scheffler in a golf tournament. I know Brooks would be 0 for 2 based off of that answer, but you can't convince me that Brooks in his mind doesn't think that he is the best player in the world anytime he tees it up. Whether he's right or wrong on that assessment, we can have a different discussion based off of that. But Brooks goes to these events with the mentality, and I've heard him say it before, X amount of players can't win because of one reason. X% of players will get into contention and can't win. You limit the field to what's 20 or 30 players at the end of the day. And I know Brooks has that mentality that at any moment he should be the guy that's going to win one of these contests. So I'm sure just the macho mentality that he has, he's sick of hearing this Scotty Scheffler answer. It doesn't mean that he wins this golf tournament and he can overcome that. But I think 25-1 is a very fair price. If we had him on the PGA Tour, or we had any semblance of success from him where he had posted a top 10 finish, we're probably looking at like 15, 16, 14, somewhere in that range to 1.
Yeah.
This guy's won 5 majors.
Yeah.
So, okay, wait. Oh, okay. All right. Hang on. Right. To Spencer's point, 0-2 versus Scotty is better than 0-9, right?
100%.
If you're going to use the rationale that Brooks has 5 majors and we should be betting him, then I can use the rationale that Rory has 4 majors and we should be betting him, right? Is that what we're saying?
Brooks has got 5 majors in the span that Rory doesn't have any.
All right.
Rory's last 4 majors were like 11 years ago. Brooksy just won last year. You know, like we've seen it more recently than him. You know, I think we also know I think he lost tons and tons of putting at the PGA.
Well, Byron, I can tell you why, like if I answer the question for you, I guess that Keith was posing, here's what I would say. When you look at a guy like Rory, and I fell for the trap this week, even with the lack of major success that he's had the past 10 years, all of that's still baked into the number of what Rory can be and what Rory is at moments of time. I think the one difference here, and I did not bet Brooks, which is a funny argument to be making here, but you know, at 25-1, that is a much different price to where I think you can kind of take some of that major success that he's had and almost put it into play a little bit more at that number. I didn't get there because I couldn't buy into that theory myself, Keith, at the end of the day. But
Yep.
I think from a number grab, it does make somewhat of sense going that route. But I think in general, as a general rule of thumb, any time that an answer is given to where a golfer has done this in the past, it's usually already baked into that price and you have no value in that moment. So we could make an argument based off of that maybe the sports books think that Brooks should actually be 40-1 and this is not a fair number to begin with. Or you could make an argument that because he hasn't succeeded to the extent that most people wanted early in the season, that this number got boosted. I guess it's just, you have to figure out where you land with that answer for how much you want to play Brooks in any iteration of the market.
I think there's been a very interesting theme that's been building this year that we're all having a very difficult time with, myself included. So I'll raise my hand and just say, everyone's having a tough time letting go. I mean, how much Spieth conversation has there been all year? This guy's won twice in 7 years, right? I mean, we can't let go of Rory. We can't let go of Brooks. Like it's tough for us to admit that our heroes, you know what I mean, have fallen a bit from grace. People can't let go of Rahm. I couldn't let go of Rahm in the first 2 majors, right? I'm like, this guy's so good. He is so good in majors. Like Brooks is so good in majors. But guess what? For every Brooks that came up in 2014 and finished 4th here at Pinehurst, there's a Ludwig that's coming around the corner, or there's a Colin, or there's a Victor, right? It's been a very interesting year for letting go of a Patrick Cantlay. You know, when Victor was 50-1 at Valhalla, and good on you, Spencer, for still betting him, but like he's 50-1 for a reason. Like everyone's like, oh, now there's super value there. And I look at that as a golf professional and I go, there's a super problem there. You know, like, and it's just very interesting to me how we keep having these discussions, that we keep going back to the same people and trying to convince ourselves to go down that road when there's obviously people in better form that are right in front of us. It's just interesting. That's all.
I mean, Keith, I've played this game for 10 years with Jason Day. I've tried to break up for 10 years and he pulls me back in over and over again. I like Jason Day this week. I want that to be noted on the show. I faded Jason Day at the Memorial. I actually think Day, and we can have an argument about where he should exactly land. I think he's a top 30 player in this tournament. We'll just leave it at that. So for the price in DFS, he's very playable.
Yeah. And if that putter, this is the thing. This is what this week is making like such uncertainty for, is anyone's putter can get hot. And then we've got, who was the big hefty fellas that the boys were all playing with a while, like in 2005, Keith? I think there was Coke or Cock or it was some really big. We're starting to approach the part in the show where my mind leaves my body and my mouth just starts running away with things.
Go to the next person.
I'll just click number 3 here and tell you that Rory McIlroy is 12-1. We've spoken about that already. Spencer, Xander Schauffele. He's sitting number 3 for you. We've already chatted about Colin, and Xander is number 3. Let's chat about him.
So I saw you tweet this, Byron, that you had some trepidation with the tickets that you had for him to come top 20, and you were considering betting out of that. There is this public sentiment that's come into play right now that I don't really agree with it. And I mean, you can tell me why you would think that, Byron, if you still believe that. But Xander, from a statistical perspective, is probably the second best player in the world right now. And I still don't know if we necessarily, as a betting community, whether that's outright betting, head-to-head betting. I think the head-to-head market, we kind of see where that trends every week with him being a favorite. So we'll exclude that for a second. But DFS, I always feel like he's the one option that nobody wants to actually play at the numbers that we're at. I really like Xander. I almost want to go on here and say that I think Xander, after not winning a major, is going to go back-to-back in majors and win the U.S. Open here. As of right now, that would be my pick to win this tournament. I know he's third. Rory's ahead of him. My concerns with Rory, and it's the lack of he's going to blow up, I'm afraid, at some point. I've already stressed that a million times. Like, Xander, I trust his ability to be able to produce, and I have now seen it happen in action. So I like Xander quite a bit for this tournament, and I don't know where the ownership's going to go for DFS. I think that's going to be the interesting mark there, but like when he was 13-1, and I know that sounds like an outrageous price when he was on Bet365 earlier today, I thought that was value on the number, and that might be a crazy thing to say.
He's a fascinating case study because everyone's speaking about him being the floodgates are going to open. And the water's going to just leave the dam. I think the air is going to get let out the balloon after the win. Like this is and from a statistical perspective, Spencer, I don't think he's the second best player in the world. He is the second best player in the world. Like there's no doubt about it. And this is what makes my concern so weird, is because I said this to you right after you won. I was like, God damn it. Now my top 10, top 20, all 4 majors is like in kind of jeopardy, because I feel like that angst, that drive to continually chase all of this is now kind of gone. I feel like he could potentially have some sort of like, he's just too chilled, like just too cocky. I don't know. It's just, it's not statistically based at all. It's just a feeling I have in my bones. I'm going to let it ride out, but I'm so intrigued to see where his career goes now after this, because the ball striking was ass at Memorial, and that's not good for him. He's been so solid in that department.
There are 7 players in my model that over a 2-year running perspective have gained over 1.3 strokes per round in strokes gained total. Scheffler would be 2.63. Xander would be 2.05. The only 2 that are over 2. Rory is 1.87. Rahm is 1.68. That is surprisingly tied with Tyrrell Hatton. We can have a Hatton discussion at some point. I do think there's intriguing upside for him at this tournament. Oberg would be 1.34, and then Morikawa would be 1.30, and then everybody else is going to be less than 1.15 in my model. So, Xander's not as far off, in my opinion, from Scotty. Like, you're looking at essentially 2.5 strokes, give or take, or strokes gained total per tournament away from Scotty, which is a lot. Like, that's how much better Scotty is than everybody else. But he is the one person that is actually in the range where he's not getting completely lapped, that we're looking at like a 3-stroke difference here.
That's just the thing, is he's just so solid. He's so solid. Keith, what you doing with Xander?
Quick Xander story from last week at Memorial. There's a new Xander in town, and I'm happy for that, because I never really enjoyed Xander before. I thought he was a little too tight to the vest. And so I asked him a question. We're at his press, or in the media center, we're at his press conference. And I said, Xander, I said, your game is like super well suited to major championship venues. Your record there is really, really good. Why do you think you've never had a top 10 here at Muirfield Village? Which I thought was a very relevant question. I think both of you guys would have loved to have heard the answer to that. Wow. To which he retorted, he said, I've never had a top 10 here, at which I didn't say anything. And he was like, you sure? Now it's just he and I. There's like 25 people in the room, but he's just he and I. And he goes, you sure? And I still didn't say anything. And I was like, why do you think that is? Right? Because I knew what his record was, right? So he kind of like looks at the guy who's the moderator from PGA Tour Comms, and he's like looking at him. So he gets on his phone or whatever, and he says, well, he goes, this is just a really hard golf course. And I don't know that I've ever given it. And he came through with this very thoughtful answer and everything. And then he turned to the guy, and the guy said, the best you ever did was T11. So then he came out to me and he said, hey, I'm sorry. You were right. I don't know that Xander would have done that a year ago, let alone 5 years ago. I think that the leadership decisions he's made in his life have transformed him, not just as a player, but as a person. For him to step away from his dad. And I don't know if I've ever said this to you guys before, but there were 3 guys on tour that I thought were severely handicapped by their son-father relationship. Every son wants to make their dad proud, right? Mm-hmm. And there's still 2 more that are out there that are under the shadow of that umbrella. And I think that they'll never reach their potential as long as that person is still like firmly entrenched in the camp. The fact that Stefan who was such a big influence on what Xander was doing, was in Hawaii. When he won his first major, was a really astronomically good thing for Xander, right? And I think that that's kind of neat. When it comes to the U.S. Open, a lot of people forget where Xander started back at Erin Hills. He qualified to get in that tournament and finished 5th.
Yeah.
Okay. He just didn't like show up like Tiger with like flowing robes and everything. You know what I mean? And like doves were flying, right? Like that guy qualified to get in the event at Erin Hills and he finished 5th. And since then, he's finished better than 14th in every single of 7 U.S. Opens he's ever been in. So like, I was never the biggest Xander fan, but over the last, like couple of months, forget the major, but like being out there on tour, he's really opened up and he's really become a man in making decisions as a leader. Like the best thing you can say about leaders is whether they're right or wrong, they make decisions, they're decisive, right? Why is everyone so critical of Jay or different people in this whole live situation, right? Is it that no one's telling anybody anything? No one's standing up and saying, this is what you need to do. Well, Xander did that with his life. I give him all the credit in the world. And I think that that's why it's taken his game to another level. I do not think he'll win back-to-back majors, but that's why I have him number 2.
Preach, baby. Preach. That was really
Just
nice,
saying.
Keith. Who are the other 2 guys, by the way?
The other 2 guys.
The other 2 guys with their dads.
You can't figure that out?
Well, I know one's with 2 letters. The other one I'm not entirely sure about.
The other one is his full-time coach. And he's got 7 runner-ups. Most recently, Valspar.
I got okay. Okay, that makes a lot of sense then. All right, but he's still young behind the ears there for a second. So, I think that his first win will also be a major. But we can chat about him when we get out of this ranking tier. Yeah, we got Scotty Scheffler, folks. I mean, I'm just going to drag it down, pop it all up. We've got Scotty across the board. Do we just not talk about, let's just not talk about him? What are we doing here? Outside of just betting this guy top 5, top 10 for me, this is the only way I think I can go about it. I don't know. How are you guys handling Scotty Scheffler? Keith, you go first.
Ooh. I've got a pretty controversial take here, so I'll let Spencer go first.
All right, Spence.
I think my biggest issue with Scotty is just the price tag above anything else here. So I am not somebody that's ever going to find myself. We'll call it plus 333 as the number that I see a lot of people posting in the space. I'm not going to find myself, even as aggressive as my card ended up being this week. I am never going to have 2 units of exposure on the line when I'm betting to win 7 units. You have to be very exact. And I'm not saying that the price isn't even necessarily right or wrong. I've talked a lot about numbers getting baked into the totals, and there's no argument that the price is being baked into the fact here. I mean, he's won 5 times on tour this season. Go back to the Genesis. That's the worst tournament he's had since the PGA Championship. And you had to throw him behind jail in the PGA Championship to have that sort of a finish, or he probably, I'm very happy for Xander that he won. I'm not so sure Xander wins that tournament if Scotty has Ted Scott on the bag on Saturday and he wasn't in jail the day before. So everything went wrong for Scotty in that moment, unfortunately, and it benefited Xander in that particular situation. From a statistical perspective, and I don't even want to talk about this for DFS because there's really no reason to say not to play him in my model, and I'm curious to hear what Keith is going to say. The 2 points that at least would push me in some sort of a direction, and I mentioned the Bermuda putting. We have seen an increase from him this season with his putter. From his long-term Bermuda putting, he falls outside the top 100. So if you want to say that he's become a better putter recently, once again, I understand that argument, but you add that to some of the weighted bogey avoidance totals that I did have in my sheet. Like, he's only 20th for me in weighted bogey avoidance, which I thought was really surprising. That stemmed from an 81st place grade from sand save percentage. He was 30th for 3-putt percentage. Those are all fine numbers, but it's one thing if I'm giving out all those totals and he's whatever number you want to throw out there to win. It's another answer where I actually am finding red flags that are entering the mix somewhat on a golfer that's 3.33 to 1. So that's a long-winded answer to say that I am priced out beyond anything else. I'm not going to get 2 units of exposure on him, but like we'd have to be in the 6 or 7 to 1 range for me to start considering this. And that's not the days that we're in anytime soon at this moment.
Spencer, would you put 2 units on him to win 1 from a top 5 or top 10? Sorry, let's go with the top 10.
See, here's the thing. That's not my market of where I would like to expose it, but I think that is so much better going that route than any of the other examples. I would rather aggressively attack them where I actually can figure out where my long-term edge is. I don't have to worry about volatility that's going to come into play. This is a challenging venue. You're going to have runouts to where if you land in this wired grass or if you land in any of these areas, you can very quickly get taken out of this tournament. And that worries me when we're paying such a premium price on Scotty. So as much as we can make this safe, and maybe for me, and I don't know who the opponent would be, it's almost like if I could find the right opponent, I'd rather lay a lot of juice in that direction, maybe beyond anything else, and find one person to beat. If you want to go the top 10 round, and I know you've had a lot of success with that, Byron, that's certainly a route to consider, but just too much volatility for me at this course to pay some of those premium totals.
I mean, he made triple bogey though at Murfield and still won the tournament. You know, like that's what we're doing though. I mean, like, so to me, I think the top 5, top 10 market allows you for one of those and he's still going to be there, you know, and I think that's why I prefer that versus the outright side of things and taking on that juice. It's been profitable for me this whole week. So Keith, I'm excited. What is going on in your brain over there?
Full disclosure, I'm not going to bet Scotty this week. If I was going to do it at that number, I should have done it last week, and I missed that opportunity, right? Everything going into the Memorial told us that he was going to gain 13 on approach again, and he went and did it, and he was trending much better with the putter, so he wasn't going to lose whatever it was, 19 strokes or something to Denny McCarthy like he did the year before, right? So I started this way. If you put the USGA in charge of this event, and it's already crispy, there's going to be more luck involved than Spencer and I are going to be comfortable with betting somebody at 3 to 1. I am not going to bet somebody in an event where they just showed me a month ago that they took the best player in the world and allowed her to make a 10. And somebody would say, maybe she's not that good. She's second on the tour in short game. All right. She's second in Nellie's second in the LPGA in short game around the green, strokes game around the green. Okay. You take the top 10 women in the world in the Rolex World Rankings, and they averaged 5.5 over par in round 1. The top 10 women in the world. Spencer, describe for me a world where the top 10 men in the world play any tournament in one round and they all average 5.5 over par. Is that even possible? Like, you're the model maniac, Byron. It could in the maniac ecosystem, could that ever happen? Right? Is it a good professional event when the cut is +8? In my opinion, as a professional, I don't want to play in tournaments like that because that tells me that I can't predict luck, right? And there's going to be a fair amount of luck that's going to take place in the tournament this week. So either if I was going to go Scotty in an event like this, I would go Scotty so heavy everywhere. I would take him everywhere I could. I would take him as an outright. I would take him top 5. I would take him low American. I would take him everywhere because when he wins everything. Right? I would take him head-to-head in any head-to-head matchup that was like under 3 to 1. I would just bank it all, and then I would go single bullet for the winner, right? But I look at the U.S. Open, and this is not the week to do it. The week to do it was last week. Next week is probably not the week to do it because it's a wedge fest, and guys can go super nuclear with the putter, and then Scotty can't really differentiate. So these 2 weeks in a row are super difficult, but with so much luck involved, I'm just not going to go down that road at 3 to 1. I just can't. I can't justify it. I can come up with better reasons why I think Colin or Cam or whoever else I go with on my outright card has a chance to take him down, right? So that's where I stand on what I'm going to do with Scotty. But what I wanted to tell you guys is that we're getting to the part in the show where Byron's going to call me old. right? So I remember the days, like 2008 Masters, Tiger goes in, he's plus 180 outright. Okay, Spence? He's plus 180 outright. He's won 10 of his last 12 tournaments. And he's going to a place where he already has 4 green jackets. We are now in rarefied air. And I'm not comparing the two of them. I'm just comparing the decision that everyone has to make. See, everyone in golf betting Twitter has only bet since 2018 when it was legal. So we've never come across this before. Right. So no one's ever had to make this decision. And I love watching and listening to all these different podcasts where people are like, they don't know what to do with Scotty. And I've heard for years, it's like, yeah, I got to win 1 in 7. And the units have to be spread here. And then everyone this week's like, well, I'm taking Scotty. Right. Like, well, wait a second. And I'm not saying that's hypocritical. They're just trying to win. And I understand that. Right. But I could remember going back to those Tiger days and betting, albeit it wasn't legal at the time, and betting and having that decision to make. Do you take the field, the best guys you can in the field, or do you take the one guy at 2-1 in a major championship, right? And it takes serious stones to make a decision. And I was super proud of the way I brought up how I thought Xander handled his life. You know what I mean? And I'm very entertained by how everyone is handling this week, because I mean, it was basically all shoved in our face last week by Scotty. Right? Like, as hard as that golf course was, he still got it done with a triple bogey. So everyone is so fearful this week of not winning and missing the Scotty bus, but there really is no bus there. It's like the backseat of a Volkswagen. It's 3-1. There's nothing there for you, right? Like it just becomes like it's so difficult, but like having everyone come up with a way to deal with this internal like anguish is really entertaining to me. So I'm enjoying this week immensely. And I'll leave it at that.
There are ramifications for placing that wager from a bankroll perspective. And I think Keith said it best. People are more concerned with saying that they hit the winner than actually making a long-term profit. And that's the unfortunate stage that we have reached at this moment right now in golf betting. And you are correct, Keith. There's a lot of people that for very long, and I will pat myself on the back. I feel like when I entered the space in 2018 and I started releasing my outright cards, and as somebody who's lived in Vegas and has been around the gambling scene for a long time, that I did it to win 8 units originally. That was what 1 unit or less to win 8. And over the course of time, I have diminished those totals ever so slightly to now win 7. This week, I have over a unit of exposure. I have 1.2 units of exposure. That's as heavy as you'll ever see me get on an outright card. And, it's one of those things that I will express. And the reason why I'm doing that is I am trying to figure out a way to take on Scotty with a couple of golfers in my sheet that I had a long-term edge on. It doesn't mean I end up being correct. It doesn't mean I picked the right names. It doesn't mean that Scotty Scheffler doesn't win. All of those things have a real potential to come into play. Scotty can win this golf tournament, and nobody is going to bat an eye when that happens, and we will not be shocked. And we are not an anti-Scotty Scheffler show. We just all showed our models and our rankings of why he is the number 1 player for us. Value at the end of the day is the only thing that matters in betting. And if you do not have value in the number of where you are placing your ticket, you are going to lose money long-term. And that is the unfortunate truth that people out there don't always take into account when they place a wager.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, you don't get to flip the screen like TikTok, like it's just, this is what we're doing. And it's hard. It's hard when it gets like this. It's really hard to make that decision, but it's the hard that makes it good, right? Tom Hanks, right? A League of Their Own. It's like, this is what really, really is fun about doing this. At the end of the day, this is what a real Sunday sweat is. It means it starts on Monday, and you're going to go all week, and you're going to grind this thing out. Like me walking that golf course in the heat with the bugs, right? And the humidity and the sand coming up, right? And then those guys are out there for 5.5-hour rounds and just battling, the elements and everything, knowing that Scotty's hanging over their head the whole time at every decision they make. I mean, this is the beauty of it. This is what makes it great. This is what, like all those years with Tiger fighting those bets. I mean, And I love all the creativity, and I'm not trying to be hypercritical or people or calling anyone a hypocrite. I just think it's interesting. No one's ever faced this before, but we have. People, Spencer, you know that. You know from back in those days, we have faced this before, right? Yeah. This is not new. This is not the Mayflower, right? And it's kind of neat that we're back here. It won't last forever. So thankfully, because golf's that way, but it's pretty cool that we're back there, and it's such a historic place.
It is. And I just want to kind of wrap up this conversation about Scotty for the US Open by saying that if you're tuning in for the first time watching the US Open and you are not a person trying to make a long-term profit off of betting, maybe Scotty Scheffler is the guy to go to this week, because your entry fee to the tournament is going to be, you're not going to get kicked out. You're going to be the last person to be kicked out, essentially. And I think Scotty's going to give you the most bang for your buck from an entertainment perspective. And that's basically what we're trying to do if you're just tuning in for the first time now. But if you're looking to make money long-term betting, then you likely don't want to put Scotty Scheffler on your card. So my father-in-law, my Keiths, my Steve, all of those people, you guys, you throw your money on there and have a good one. And those that are trying to make money long-term, follow Spencer and I and Keith's situation there and kind of just go through that. So that was fun.
How do we do on time? Had to be long.
Did the top 10 guys, there's what up, and Craig Craze along the way. Yeah. Some guys that we haven't chatted about. Wyndham Clark and Patrick Cantley in the 9-2 range. Pretty much everyone else we've already discussed. Those are two fascinating subjects. They both struggling mightily. One has a US Open win, but both have horrific major track records, essentially, based off of their current skill level, relative. So, Spencer, if you were to pick between Patrick Cantley and and Wyndham Clark, which avenue would you go down?
I told you, Byron, I full faded Wyndham Clark last week, and I feel like my model has been very accurate. I had him last year at the US Open. I had him at Pebble Beach at 100-1. This is one of those golfers that my model has been accurate on over the course of time. I like Wyndham for this tournament. I think that the buzz has died off of him. I have him as a top 15 win equity projected player in my sheet. It's a boom or bust play with him. I certainly understand that the form we have gotten recently has massive concerns in the profile, but when you get a price in, and I didn't get there in the outright market, but boost the number out to 75-1 or higher, talk about a golfer that, at least in public perception wise, is going to be overpriced, because nobody's going to want to play him at this number that we're getting right now after the results that we've gotten. I think he's a good DFS play.
Yes. Cantley or Clark?
I would go Cantley. I just think it's really ironic that Wyndham won the event last year at 80-1, and he's back to 80-1 with a signature win in between. So I'd go Cantley.
Yeah. And it's crazy to think that Wyndham has had such a good track record, and we're only 4 starts away from a 3rd place finish. And yet, we are. That's just how crazy his game has gone south. So fascinating stuff there. I think we were chatting about, we haven't really spoken about Max. His major track record has been atrocious, but that T3 came right after the T10 at the Open last year. So I think it's really important to have some major pedigree, and I think he's starting to kind of roll that through. If I were to tell you between Max and Matthew Fitzpatrick, Keith, which would you lean into there? Matthew Fitzpatrick is currently $8,200 and Max Homa is $8,600 on the DFS slate.
Matthew Fitzpatrick. Pedigree in the US Open, TCC's or the Country Club's a great comp for this. He was pretty impressive on Sunday. One of the few players, I forget what the total number of player was that shot under par, but he was one of them.
3.
3. Okay. So he's one of Colin, and then one of the guy. I can't remember off the top of my head, but
I think it was Bezzy maybe.
Oh yeah. He jumped big time too. So, yeah, I would go Fitzy.
Okay. I like it. And that's the thing, but you're getting so much volatility from Fitz, whereas I think with Max, you're getting a bit more safety. But Fitz can go on these runs, man, where on a difficult golf course, he can still fire. So I'm right there with you. I think I prefer his track record in majors over Max anyway. But I think Max will likely be the least owned option. Spence?
Oh, sure.
Fitz was the first player, if we're talking about our top 10s here, that didn't make my list. He was 11th overall for me. One of the intriguing things that and I've talked about this quite frequently recently on this show, which is certain players that anytime they receive a projected increase in their weighted proximity versus what their baseline is. So that's just throw them on a specific venue. Where does their upside land compared to where it normally would be? Fitz is one of those golfers that when he has positive trajectory in that area, we usually get good results. We saw it last week. You look here, he's inside the top 40 for me from weighted proximity when you place that extra emphasis on long iron play. He's 72nd for me from a 2-year perspective on any other type of a course out there. So I think the iron play is going to be intriguing. He's 17th for me in weighted scoring. And if you want to look at the top 10 grades for me in this sheet, 7th for weighted strokes gained total, 8th for strokes gained total at hard scoring courses. And then Byron, your stat of the week, he's 10th for me in strokes gained total at majors.
There we go, dude. And that's the thing. It makes a big deal. And one thing I do want to mention, though, at the Open and Augusta, 80% of winners at those two venues have either had a second or a win in their prior major track record. If you want to take that 80% and transfer it to the US Open, you can move your number to 10. So instead of a second place finish or better, it's a top 10. So that just makes this event so much more like the US Open in general is just a volatile. The cut being smaller, just everything just makes it volatile. So I think that's kind of why I've shot at these like longer odds, but it's an interesting tournament to take long shots on. So just thought I'd throw that out there as we're scooting on down. Tony Finau or Jordan Spieth? Go ahead, Keith.
Geez. I was just going to say that just goes back to the Scotty argument at 3-1. In this particular tournament, 15 of the last 19 have been first-time major winners.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
Yeah, I would go Finau. I bet Finau at Memorial. I think Finau is very good off short grass. As far as the short game goes, I'm not as worried about the putter here, and the ball striking is obviously very, very good. So I would go Finau. And who was the other guy?
Spieth, who just gained the most strokes off the tee at Memorial and missed the cut.
Wait, who? I got it.
Spence. Keith's getting sassy with me now. I'm going to call you old soon, sir.
You just did.
Spencer. No, I'm just joking.
I don't know if you've noticed this, Keith, or maybe
we've
it's
also
just
got some lag on the internet side of things, which is making things awkward too.
Whose internet is it? Is it your internet, Byron?
I think so. My wife just came home and things have gone south. So yeah, probably.
I think that's a sign that the show
guys.
has gone on too long, where I see your lips moving, but nothing's coming out. And I don't know when to actually chime in and talk, but I'll say Jordan's, we're talking about to actually win this tournament, correct? I'll say Jordan Spieth based off of that answer. Okay. I don't necessarily want to go down either one of these two routes, but I think Spieth has more of a potential to actually hit like the boom part of it than Finau does. I have bet Tony Finau so many times this year, including last week, and he's really not been close outside of Houston, if you want to say. I mean, he gained 1 million strokes ball striking there and couldn't make a putt. And in a major championship, I would have concerns of Finau's ability to actually make putts down the stretch.
Awesome. So can you guys hear me yet? Am I
Yes.
back? Okay.
Yeah.
I was about to just type to you guys to just kind of rattle off a few more names out of you on your own while I just sit here in a stagnant staring mode, but seems like I'm back.
One?
Yeah.
All right. I got one for you two guys. Who would you take, Harris English or Keegan Bradley?
Ooh. I'm going to instantly say Keegan because I have a Keegan outright. I think he's driving the ball far too well right now to leave him off a card.
Keegan would also be my answer. I was trying to figure out a way to get exposure to him of some kind. The problem is I think he's a better bet inside of like the outright market or any of these high-end placement bets. There are some head-to-head wagers out there that I am highly intrigued of actually punching the ticket on Keegan. I worry a little bit about his volatility, but Keegan was a top 25 player in every iteration of how I built my model this week. And that's not to say that Harris English also didn't produce. He was inside of the top 33 in every way that I built it. But, when we're having to parse through the data and actually make a decision, I'll ever so slightly lean towards Keegan here.
Ever so slightly, because those are two very nice options, I would say. So that was a great question there, Keith. Which one would you lean to?
Keegan. I just, and it's a slight edge, but, and maybe even course history lean, gives him the tiebreaker. T4 in 2014. And it extremely, for everybody that knows that Hideki is great around the green, that's how many people don't know how good Keegan is around the green. And he is extraordinarily good around the green player and scrambler. Just awesome.
Very good at lag putting as well. So I think,
and he won his only major on Champion Bermuda. Just, maybe that matters.
In his first appearance of a major as well, which was quite fascinating. As we're scooting on down here, Sahith Theegala, or know what? I'm going to change this just for Spencer. Cameron Young or Jason Day? 75, 74.
You know what's so funny, Byron, is I was saying, let me ask a question here, and you ended up chiming in before I could. I was going to say, let me ask you guys, Jason Day versus Cameron Young. So great minds think alike there. I have an answer. I've kind of alluded to it previously, and I'll let Keith talk about it first, because I know throughout the show you have mentioned something about Cameron Young so far. So if you want to give me your take on Jason Day versus Cameron Young, we'll start with you.
Sure. It's funny you said great minds think alike. I thought it was fools seldom differ. Neither here nor there. I would go Jason Day as well. For course history, also the way that he plays, Sandbelt, Australia, the short game is such a huge factor here. I mean, that's not splitting hairs. When you start to talk about the difference between their two short games, it's not the difference between what we're saying about Harris and Keegan Bradley. I mean, we're talking these two are light years apart. And the ball striking it seems as if almost some of his struggles for Cameron have kind of permeated into other parts of his game. Yeah. So he just seems a little bit off. Also, the U.S. Open's been his worst of 4 majors as far as performances go. So I would be much more on Jason Day. He just makes much more sense. And he's a nice high ball hitter, a good putter, great scrambler. And he's been in relatively good form this year. Good enough that I think he would win that head-to-head matchup for sure.
Yeah, I think I would probably imagine Cameron Young comes in less owned than Jason Day. I don't know about how much, and I think that will be the decision I'd have to make on if I want to go to Cameron Young, because I still think Cameron Young is going to have his first win in a major. This is going to happen, and he's been so close so often, and it just shows up. So it's going to be. I won't play him if he's anywhere near, call it 10%. I'm going to need serious leverage on Cameron Young to get him in my lineups. But if not, so be it. I'm not too scared there.
I assume you will. I assume you will get that leverage. Like we talked about it on Better Golf last week, Byron. When your nickname in the space becomes Scam Young, and you continue to disappoint every single week, it's people are not going to want to go back there. And I can talk about my model not necessarily loving him. He has better upside than he does his floor. And that's why for large field GPP contests, there's consideration to be had. But any of the safety markets, like we're talking specifically a head-to-head bet, I would kind of like to fade Cameron Young in any of those spots.
Well, Cam Young won me my Sam Burns matchup last week because he made the cut only. That's all I needed from him. But that's the situation we're living in. Yeah. Tom Kim or Minwoo Lee, Keith, 2 very different individuals, but one, Tom Kim, he's got some major pedigree in his bones.
Tom Kim, I'm taking the tank engine for sure. Yeah. I listened to the Minwoo Lee argument earlier, and I thought it was fantastic, but I just don't see the approach game being there. And I get the comp last year from LACC, but Tom Kim has been really impressive in majors. And if there was going to be a setup of a golf course that favored him because of his lack of length, I mean, this is a perfect spot. He's an unbelievable scrambler. So I would go Tom Kim.
And think about how much he's putted well when he's won these tournaments, right? Like I can see him making putt after putt after putt at this kind of a venue because he's just that kind of guy. Spencer, Tom Kim or Min Lee?
I'm gonna go Minwoo because that's actually the ticket that I punched. But
Yeah.
I do want to say, I think if we're looking for DFS here, and if you want to start at, I mean, I mentioned Hatton earlier, so we can go like to the upper part of the sevens and work our way down. Hatton, Thagala, Jason Day, Tom Kim, Minwoo Lee, Ben On, Sung Jae Im. I think all of those players have playability in different iterations of the market. So it's more so for me an answer of how much I like Minwoo than anything for any other reason. Tom Kim could win that matchup very easily. It's a 52-48% sort of difference for me there. I think there's a lot of really intriguing options, though, of a lot of those guys I just mentioned in that $7,000 range that have playability in this tournament.
Yes, it's the range that makes me think Scotty Scheffler is going to be very popular again, because I think someone asked you about how you want to play Scotty Scheffler in the different contests. I've been going on about this the whole time. Scotty was in the optimal in a 800 person contest with me. Like it's just happening now, and it's unfortunate. So I think I'm locking Scotty in this week. I'm just locking him in. I'm going to play everyone around him. I'm trying to find the 5 best guys around Scotty because I think he's going to be the optimal. For the last 4 minutes, let's go yes or no answers only, or just the one name of the two. I'm going to go Keith, then Spencer. Let's go Sung Jae Im or Benny On.
Im.
Spence?
I'll go Sung Jae.
Yeah, I like them both. We'll see what happens. Justin Rose or Brian Harman?
Rose.
Harman.
Austin Eckroat, Denny McCarthy.
Eckroat.
I'll go McCarthy.
Okay, Spencer, tell us why.
Well, I mean, I'm going specifically based off of where my model has the two. Like, if I look at this from a safety number, and I do think that we can play whatever the best rank is when you're talking about a golfer that's going to be in the $6,000 range. I have a value on McCarthy, even with his overall rank. I have him 36 overall. He gets worse for upside, which would make sense at a tournament like this, but the safety number put him inside of the top 20 for me. So a lot of that's going to be because of the back-to-back top 20 finishes that he's had at US Opens. His short game can be really good if he's one of those golfers. Like, there's been such a talk in the space so far, and I did it at the beginning of the show, where the longest and the straightest player is going to win. And while I realize that's not the recipe of the long end of it for Denny McCarthy, there are players that if you can take one of those two areas and find the high-end success from those metrics, I think you can produce a top 10 or 20 finish. So McCarthy's sort of grading as one of those golfers that is landing right in that range for me.
He's fascinating because he's got that short game. That's the wild thing. All right, 15% or 20%, Sepp Straka. What's his ownership? At $6,500, Keith.
At 65. 15.
Spence?
Here's the answer I'm going to give, and this is maybe where this is the contrarian answer. Sepp Straka is one of my biggest fade candidates that I have on the board this week. So whatever the number is of either one of those two totals, I will have head-to-head matchups against him. I will not be playing him in DFS. I have concerns with the profile specifically for this tournament, to where last week he was one of my favorite values that I had on the board. This week it's gone in the exact opposite direction. 53rd overall for me, 79th for upside. The safety numbers are sure fine, but it's a lot of that around the green game and the negative returns there. And for as much as he's been ball striking it, and he has been ball striking it the last couple tournaments, he moves in the wrong direction for a tournament like this. Like, he was 60th for me in weighted proximity when I added in those extra long irons. And even the weighted total driving only put him 53rd just because of the 107th place grade that I had in strokes gain off the tee for him when you took hard courses into play. So I have my concerns with Sepp Straka.
Yeah. Keith, hit me with that, and then let's almost get out of here. I think we've been holding these people for far too long. I'm seeing myself blurry. That's the first time that's ever happened to me. So what are your favorite plays in the 5K range for the both of you? Starting with
the 5K range.
The 5K range is gross.
Oh man.
Yes. You can't say Harry Higgs.
I was just going to say that. Why he's not the 2024 version of Jason Gore?
That's who I was trying to think of.
Oh man!
All right, Spencer, you go ahead first. Let Keith. We're going to let him knock his stuff out there.
Let me think.
I mean, if I'm being honest, I really don't want to get down in this section if I can avoid it.
Yeah.
Mac Meisner graded well for me. Justin Lauer graded as like a fringe person that could make or miss the cut. Shanks, Svensson, Kuchar, but there's really no name, and that's the very top end of the range we're talking about to begin with. These are borderline made cut candidates that I would rather move into the $6,000 section, and there's a lot other I'd rather play Taylor Pendrith at 6,100 or an option like that.
Sure. Okay, so basically leave the fives alone, go into the sixes, and try and figure out it from there. Keith, I'm assuming you're sharing a similar sentiment.
Yeah, I mean, I just see guys that are hanging right around those low sixes, like a Steven Yeager who drives the ball great and has an incredible short game that has just figure it out up. I mean, there were so many options up top where you could go off by $300 or $400, right? Yeah. So I just it's 68 guys qualified to get in this. And I know earlier I did a little soliloquy on Xander, but I don't see Xander down there, right? From 2017. So throwing it out there.
You have you have a plethora of players in the $6,000 section that are going to be inside of the top 35 of my model. Keith mentioned two of them in Keegan Bradley and Harris English. He just talked about Steven Yeager. Russell Henley. There's a million names that we can go to. If you want to look at.
I mean, we live in a world where Taylor Morris, one of the few guys that finished top 5 in 2 majors this year, right? Yeah. Rory didn't do that. Just saying. Taylor Moore.
Rory's busy doing other things, folks, just like my internet. But that was fun. We had a blast. It's the US Open. You know what? Not a lot of people can speak about golf for 2 hours on a show. And we just did that. And we could probably keep on going for another 2 if we really wanted to. But we have to send old man Keith off to bed. And it's now 2 hours. So now I'm just sending dig after dig after dig. And we're all just doing it tongue in cheek. So Keith, thank you so much for coming on the show again. We love you on the show over here. And it's so much fun getting to hear what your thoughts are about the golf. And it's just, I'm so excited for this week. So tell the people everything that's going on in your life this week. You're in the area and it's just exciting. So,
well, the most exciting thing where I love when I come on here and I get Spencer's revelations, like when he kind of talks out to the screen about his own issues with what he's doing. Earlier, he talked about how he now bets Brooks more because he's with Liv than he was when he was on the PGA Tour. I thought that was a great Spencer revelation. And then the second one was when he went deep on the whole betting Rory and not being able to let him go, as if it was I don't know, a woman that he thought of in high school or something like that on TV or whatever, like a crush that he had or something. It's very interesting. So I enjoyed that immensely. But no, to answer your question, the good fun that we have here is totally backed up with really thoughtful and accurate information, which is what I find most inspiring. So if you're into stuff like that, then go check me out at Read the Line. I mean, I think at this point, after 2 hours, most people know where I'm coming from. I had some fun with Pat Mayo this week. We did a really in-depth course preview. There's nobody better at asking thoughtful questions, and I'm pretty good at talking. So we had a fun show there. I spent some time with kind of some fundamental media with Gary Williams. You remember him from the Golf Channel. He's has a golf media company out there that he started called 5 Clubs. Johnson Wagner's on there. Gil Hans is on there, whatever. So he wanted to talk about golf betting. We did a U.S. Open golf betting preview show. You can check that out. And of course, you'll see me on, if I'm allowed to say, Rotowire. Run
This
Pure
is your
Sports.
plug. You can say whatever you want.
All right, so you'll see me this week on Rotowire, Run Pure Sports, and of course Sports Grid a couple times over the next couple days, reporting live from Pinehurst. So all of this is down here. This is the Media Hotel, and obviously you can always go to readtheline.com. That's where all the links are to the content, and go subscribe. Come on, you know you want to.
Make sure you read that line, folks. Spencer, take us out of here.
Well, once again, Keith, we appreciate you coming on. Like, there's you and Jason Sobel, and there's a handful of other people that I do shows with here and there, but I always enjoy, I name you with Sobel, like you guys, the insight that you bring to the table, from just understanding, being there at the tournament, actually talking to the players, being able to give an answer about Xander that you personally talked to him. We can all come on, we can run the data and give all these answers, but you know, there are certain things like Rory being the last person to show up for Augusta where there's no way that you can put that into a model and actually get an answer based off of that. So it's an absolute pleasure having you on this show. You know, I will blame Byron for this, for keeping you for 2 hours, but it was a lot of fun.
Hey, when I'm getting up on a 2-hour show,
I wouldn't stay for 2 hours if respect wasn't a two-way street, boys. That's all. For sure.
Thank you, Keith. What is not two-way is my Wi-Fi once more time, but you know what? What's one-way street is hitting that like button, because that's easy to do. Hit the subscribe on the way out. Please check out all our stuff at rotoballer.com. Please use code MANIAC or TEE-OFF for yourself over there to get yourself a little 10% discount. And we really, really appreciate you guys for showing up. I had a blast. I know you guys did too. I'm assuming the chat did too. They're kind of popping off now that we're getting out of here. We really appreciate all of you guys showing up. You guys were bringing the heat tonight, so we really appreciate that. So it's the US Open. Let's enjoy every minute of it, and let's win some goddamn money this week, folks.